All right, so welcome to this video. We are going to do a very important question in this video. So this question is the one which will be covering many of the topics. Two very important topics that are examined in the MA1 exam, and these are also examined in the MA2 exam as well, and also in FMA exam as well. So what are these two topics? So this is the inventory requirement topic, which will be tested in this question that I'm going to do, and the topic of process costing. So this question includes a combination of both of these topics. So let's go to this question. So this question is in process costing chapter. Process costing. Here it is. So this is the question Gamma Co. I might change the numbering of this question later because I am always revising, improving my notes, changing, and making a little bit changes. So I might change the question number, but the name will be the same, and of course the question data will remain the same. So Gamma Co. This is the question. This is the name of the question. So Gamma Co. is a soap manufacturer. So of course, when a business is producing soaps, then of course the business will be using process costing. Why? Because soap production is in large volumes of quantity. So and the first criteria of process costing is met, and the second criteria was that the units are not separately identifiable throughout production. So definitely when soap is being produced, so of course you cannot identify each unit of the soap separately until the production has ended. So of course, during the production, the material for the soap, when it is being prepared, then of course you cannot identify each of the different unit of soap separately. So of course, both of these second two criterias meet now here. So that is why the business would be using process costing. So where were these criteria written? These were written in here. Large volume of identical units are produced through a process or multiple processes. Units are not separately identifiable throughout production. And so let's do the question. Let's start the question. So, so it is saying what is it asking us for? Calculate material L's purchase requirement for the month of May. So material L is an input for soap. And the question is asking for material L's purchase requirement. So how much the company Gama Co should purchase for the material L. So material L's purchase requirement. So if you remember the formula for the purchase requirement, it was first we have to calculate the expected usage, and then we add the closing inventory, because of course we do not want to just run out of inventory once the period has ended. So of course every business maintains the closing inventory requirement, and then obviously we are going to less the opening inventory, because opening inventory is already present in the inventory, so we don't have to purchase it. So this calculation is done in the units meaning kgs, liters, meters for material. So in any way that you do measure for your material, so that will be included in units. So it could be kgs, liters, meters, etc. Anything. So now, so you calculate the expected usage, then add closing inventory for this material requirement, and then less opening inventory. So then the figure that you come up to is the material else purchase requirement. Is the materials purchase requirement. So this is simply the formula for the purchase requirement calculation for any of the material. So now the question comes that how are we going to calculate the expected usage? So expected usage, you must remember, it was calculated as material usage per unit multiply by finished goods production requirement. Expected usage is equal to material usage per unit multiply by finished goods production requirement. So now let's just link this topic to process costing. So how is this topic going to be connected to process costing? So now, whenever we are going to talk about the process costing, you must remember this thing, that usage is equal to input. Usage is equal to input. So for example, if I'm calculating the expected usage, then I am actually calculating what is the expected input requirement for the period. So how much material is the company going to be needing to be input into the production process? So expected usage is the expected input requirement. So usage is equal to input. So you must remember this. So I can write in bracket here also to further elaborate this point, that usage is equal to input. It means that not equal to output or output quantity. So for example, here it is written that each unit of soap has 10 grams of material L. This is the output quantity. This 10 grams is the output quantity, because these 10 grams are present in each unit of the soap after the soap has been produced, obviously. So of course, in order to produce a unit of soap which has 10 grams of material L present in it, more material L has to be inputted. Why? Because there's a 10% normal loss in the production process. So obviously, if we are going to produce a unit of soap that has 10 grams of material L, we must input more than 10 grams, because of course there is 10% normal loss in the production process. So input quantity is not equal to output quantity in most cases. In every process, there occurs some type of loss, and that is named as normal loss. So of course, after accounting for normal loss, the output quantity is never equal to inputs. So you must remember this thing, that usage is equal to input. Very important thing. So if we just replace usage with input in this formula, so what will be the formula look like? So expected input requirement, I can just add this word here, is equal to material usage per unit. So I can write it as material input per unit multiplied by finished goods production requirement. So now finished goods production requirement is given. The business plans to produce 10,000 units of soap in the month of May and 12,000 units in the month of June. Right? So what for which month we are going to calculate the purchase requirement? We need to calculate for the month of May. So obviously we are going to use the data for the month of May. So production requirement for May is 10,000 units. So finished goods production requirement is what? 10,000 units. So we need to find the material input requirement, because finished goods production requirement is already given. We don't need to do any further working on it. So it is 10,000 units. It is useful to just mention the units are dollars, so it just saves you from some of the confusion. So we need to now calculate the material input per unit. This is the important thing, that this is the main thing that this question, which makes this question difficult. The calculation of material input per unit. So how are we going to calculate it? It is tricky, but once you got it, once you understand it, this concept applies to different many further questions, because it just I would say it just enhances your understanding of the percentages, of the usage of percentages. So let's get into it. So material input per unit, how are we going to come to this figure? So you must remember that whenever normal loss is given, for example, there it is mentioned that normal loss is equal to 10%. Here it is mentioned. Normal loss is equal to 10%. So 10% of what? 10% of what? 10% of input. You must remember this, that input is 100%. Sorry, input is 100%. Input is always 100%. You must remember this. So input is will always be equal to 100%. If normal loss is 10%, then how much will be equal to the output quantity? The output quantity would now be equal to, this means that output quantity would be equal to 90%. How? Because of course, if you are going to input the material 100% material, then 10% is lost in the production process, then obviously the output quantity would be equal to 90% of the input. So I can write it as 100% minus 10%. So for example, if normal loss is 20%, then output quantity would be 80%. So you can just simply but very easily calculate the output quantity. So once you have calculated the output quantity, now we can write this as output quantity is equal to 90% of input. We can surely write it like this because of course an input is 100%. So now we know the output quantity per unit. What is the output quantity per unit? It is 10 grams. So 10 grams, we can write it like this, is equal to 90% of input. So now we have established the equation. Now we just need to readjust it to find the input quantity. Input is equal to 10 divided by 90%, 10 grams divided by 90%. So I can just write it here. Input is equal to 10 divided by 90%. Very easy, simple. So input is 11.11 kgs. The unit was kg. No, it is, sorry, grams. So grams per unit. So see, we have come to the input quantity. Input, this is the material input per unit. In order to produce a soap that contains 10 grams of material L, we have to input 11.11 grams of material L. We must input the 11.11 grams of material L into the production process. Then we only then we could come with to the to a unit of soap that has 10 grams of material L. We can see that does it work? So yeah, we can see that. So we can just multiply this by 10%. So this will be the normal loss. So we can just deduct this normal loss and we will come to the answer of 10. This is the output quantity. 1.11 is the normal loss, and the input quantity would be 11.11 per unit. So now, what would be material input per unit? We have just come to the material input per unit. So what would be the expected input requirement? Expected input requirement. So it would be, this would be equal to expected usage, or expected input requirement would be 10,000 units multiplied by material input per units, which is 11.11. So expected usage is this thing, this figure in grams. So now you have to add the closing inventory requirement. So how much is the closing inventory requirement? So this is written here. For each type of inventory, the business policy is to maintain enough inventory at the end of the month, which will fulfill 30% of the demand in the following month. So it is saying that at the end of the month, there must be enough inventory that from which by using that inventory, we could fulfill the 30% of the demand in the next month, in the following month. So following month is June, obviously, May, and then June. So what is the demand of the June? It is 12,000 units. So we must have enough material L in the inventory at the end of May, which will fulfill 30% of the 12,000 units of the demand in the month of June. So we need to find the 30% of 12,000 is equal to 30% into 12,000. So it is 3,600. So we must have enough inventory of material L in the inventory at the end of the month of May, from which we could produce 3,600 soaps. So how much do we need then? So 3,600 multiplied by, we can simply just multiply with the material input per unit. So closing inventory is 40,000. We now need to less the opening inventory. So opening inventory would be the closing inventory of the previous month. So for example, before May, which month comes before May? I guess April, January, February, March, April, May. Yeah, April. So the month of April's closing inventory would be the opening inventory for the month of May. So how much is the closing inventory for material April? Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry. I just confused it. So what is the closing inventory for the month of April? Yeah. So for the month of April, the closing inventory requirement would be 30% of the demand of the month of May. What is the demand of the month of May? It is 10,000, right? So we can write it as 30% of 10,000 is 3,000. So this is the amount of soaps that you need to produce. You need to have enough material L in the at the end of the month of April. From that, you could produce 3,000 units of soap. So how much are we going to need? So we can just simply multiply it 11.11, just like the way that we did here. So now we can just, we have all the figures, we can just add and subtract the figures. So we will come to the answer. Plus this minus this. Yeah. So this is the answer. We need, this is a very long figure. I can just make it a bit easier to understand. It is 117,778 grams. Yeah. So you can round it off to kgs. Obviously, the business would be purchasing in kgs. So divided by 1,000. So this is the final answer, rounded to kgs. So this is the answer to this question. So I hope this question has helped you in understanding of the concepts of the process costing and the material purchase requirement. So this question is very crucial, very important for the exam point of view, because obviously this question was very difficult, and these types of questions do not normally occur. You can say that out of 5 questions, out of even I would say out of 10 questions in MA1 exam, one question could be at this level of difficulty, because it is very difficult question. For the exam of FMA, you can say that for every 5 question, one question could be like this. So it is a very difficult question. So that was all. We'll meet in the next video, inshallah. Allah Hafiz.